At T-Mobile, our critical mission is providing unparalleled 5G coverage for when connectivity is mission critical. Introducing T-Priority, America's best 5G network experience for first responders, even in times of congestion. More capacity, faster speeds, better coverage. T-Priority from T-Mobile, built for tomorrow's emergencies, ready today. Discover more at t-priority.com.
For qualifying organizations on eligible rate plans, coverage not available in some areas and may be impacted by emergencies.
Hi, here's your report.
Thanks, Jane. I wish I could hire a whole team of yous.
Try posting a job on LinkedIn. It's the world's largest professional network. Unlike resumes, LinkedIn gives a real-time view into a candidate's skills, experiences, and more.
Huh, let's do it. You're irreplaceable, Jane, but another you would be great.
Find your perfect match with LinkedIn. Post your free job at linkedin.com/achieve. That's linkedin.com/achieve. Terms and conditions apply.
Love, exciting and new. Hello, Hannah Waddingham here. Have you seen the fabulous new Sun Princess? World-class entertainment, exceptional dining, and the greatest pizza ever. It's a love.
Don't miss our Come Aboard sale with up to 40% off and free room upgrades. Visit princess.com or call your travel advisor to book. Princess Cruises. Terms and restrictions apply. Offer ends 2/28/25. Ships of Bermudan and British Registry.
Welcome back to YAOK. I am Alyssa. We are joined by Eric. Say hi, Eric.
Hi, Eric.
Eric J. Brown, to be so specific.
Hi, Eric J. Brown.
Okay,
to be
great.
Specifically.
Thank you. Good. That's good. How are you doing today, Eric?
This evening, I'm doing well. This is the latest we've ever recorded a podcast.
Yes. This is like the closest we've ever come to a sleepover. It's 9 p.m.
You do look cozy. That looks like a nice bed.
I
love your headboard.
Thank you so much. It's from Amazon. My brother is here, and so he's in my little office space, and so I'm doing the pod from my bed. It is very cozy. It is, as the night has gone on, though. I kind of am like, I'm literally the only reason that I'm up right now. The thing that's standing between me and being fully asleep is my eyes being open. That's it.
I'm up in my office is where I usually am, but I have this new little mini heater thing. It's like an oil heater. Ooh. And it like heats up the room like instantly. And I turned it on when I first got up here because the heat on my third floor turns off at like 5 p.m. because I'm like, that's end of the day. I need to go downstairs just to get myself out of here. And I forgot it was on until halfway through, and I was like, why am I like starting to sweat? So now I'm like so warm and cozy. I'm just like, I want to go to bed now.
It's like living in a sleeping bag. I love when that happens.
Usually I'm like freezing. At my house, I keep it on. It's a big old house and it's drafty as hell. So I can't afford to be spending thousands of dollars a month on heating bills. So usually I keep it to be like 65 degrees. And
60.
During the day downstairs, it goes down to 60. And up here it's 65. And so I have my little heater now.
Oh
and
my
I
God,
close my door.
Very chilly. That's very chilly. Well, today we had Sophie Gonzales on to talk about her book, Nobody in Particular. And we had such a great time. Also, Sophie is Australian. So
yeah, so
strap
she's
in.
not chilly because it's summer down there.
It's summer down there. And you get to listen to an Australian accent for a whole hour. You're welcome.
Yeah.
And we had a great time. And what else did we talk about? We talked about reincarnation. We talked about
I mean, the whole idea that book ideas are living creatures, I think.
Yeah, that's just like are bouncing around and you just kind of retrieve them when they need to come to you. I don't know. I love that theory. I think that's really fun. So I'm glad that Sophie was also, she kind of like alluded to that. Did you hear that snore?
No, was your dog snoring?
Yes.
I did. I just
Yeah, so I love that theory came to life kind of naturally in the way that Sophie's stories come to her. So yeah, we had a really great time chatting with her, and this book comes out in June. You have to put it on your TBR so that when it comes out, you'll be the first to know. And I can't wait for you all to hear everything that we talked about.
5 long years, our lives like magnetic fields. You are my universe. You are my universe, and I'm just a planet.
It's a mess. It's you're not getting my my very polished self at the moment. I'm so sorry.
Your hair a mess and my hair a mess are we have very different definitions of mess. If I took the hair tie out of my hair, it would stay exactly in this position.
My hair just stays like this all the time. So.
But that must be nice, you know?
It is. I don't have to do anything. I wash it like on Sundays, and that's it.
Oh, that's
Just
beautiful.
like, boom, done. So hi, Sophie. It's great to finally like talk to you in person. We've never talked in person. We've only talked online. How are you?
Just years of online interactions culminating in this.
I know. It's exciting. And you're actually we had an author who was calling in from Romania, and they were originally like the furthest, but now you're our furthest guest, all the way down.
Romania still somehow seems further to me. But...
It does.
Well, I feel like it's probably because it's like halfway between all of us. So
yeah.
And if I'm being honest, geographically, I'm not sure which is further, and it's just based on the vibes. Romania seems further. Australia feels a lot closer because I feel like, I don't know, we need to figure something out. It shouldn't take me almost 24 hours to get there from New York. I feel like I need to be able to be there. I need to be able to, experience what that's like one day. But anyways, we're very grateful for you joining us first thing in the morning like this. It's really nice. And I love that you guys were like social media pen pals. I love when that happens.
Sophie actually blurbed my first book, All That's Left in the World.
Wow. That's really special.
It's right here. It is. Right here.
It's a fantastic book.
Boom.
Yeah,
right there.
That
How
is
exciting.
So cool.
Yeah.
My cousin loves that book. Loves it.
Well, I love your cousin. So. And the reason I actually asked Sophie to blurb my book is because I actually... the editor of your first book, Only Mostly Devastated, offered on All That's Left in the World. And while I was having my call, she was telling me about Only Mostly Devastated. And if for anybody listening that does not know, it's kind of like a queer Grease retelling. And like as she was explaining it to me, she was like, oh, it's like All That's Left in the World kind of reminded me of it, just as like the like pop culture way and like the romance way. And I was like, oh, this sounds really good. So I went out and bought it. And after I read it, I was like, I'm going to put her on my list to blurb All That's Left in the World. And I was so honored that you said thank you. Yes. So thank you.
Of course. No, I mean, it's one of those things, right? It's not like a similar book, but I can see, I really like your writing style. So it doesn't surprise me. The vibes.
It's the vibes.
Yeah.
I think it's the romance and just like the way that the characters kind of interact.
Yeah, like if you wrote a rom-com or if I wrote a post-apocalyptic thriller, like they might come out like siblings.
You should write a post-apocalyptic thriller.
Who's to say?
In Australia, post-apocalyptic thriller in Australia is even more exciting.
Oh, it's like
everything down there is already trying to kill you. So.
Yeah. Isn't that like the plot of Mad Max?
Yeah, it is. You should write a new Mad Max.
YA queer romance Mad Max.
Yeah.
Marry them all. It would be crazy.
What a pitch.
I'm into it. But we're here to talk about your new book, Nobody in Particular, which, so I read the, yes, we got
She's
our
gorgeous.
here.
Thank you.
I do like this cover. That's
yeah.
kind of a surprisingly sexy cover for a YA too, by the way. But I was reading the foreword, and this is actually one of the earliest. Is this the first book that you ever wrote? Or is it, I know you've edited it since, but is it like just one of the early ones that you've went out on submission with?
Yeah, it was the book that I got agented with, the first book that I ever took out on submission, etc. So it was the second book that I ever wrote in my life. Yeah. But yeah, this thing has gone through a lot in the last decade and a half.
Can you tell us just a brief kind of pitch about it?
Yeah, so it's a book about a crown princess who is disgraced and while she's trying to rebuild her reputation, she meets a girl at her boarding school, an American exchange student, not exchange student, an American immigrant, I suppose. And they end up liking each other quite a bit more than the princess ever really intended to. And it's a terrible time for her because not only is she just not in the position to have any more scandals or dramas go down, she's never, ever going to be able to come out at any point because she's the princess, crown princess, future queen of a very Catholic country.
That's a really challenging story, and I feel like even throwing in that it's like a very Catholic country, does like religion play a part in how her challenges show up coming out?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's a very relevant part of the story, if anything. When I initially wrote the story, this was well before same-sex marriage had been legalized. So I think at the time it was, in some good ways, a little bit more, we've come a long way since then. So back then it was more of just like a given that a public figure like that would have difficulties coming out. Whereas, the newer version of the story, it's like, okay, so why in a time when I think that a decade and a half later, we would be more accepting of these kinds of things. Why is this particular situation so different? Why is this struggle still happening? And at the end of the day, different countries will have different cultural preferences, different religions, and all of that tends to marry together to create exceptional circumstances. So I really wanted to represent some of the circumstances that very much could and do occur in real life. I was raised Catholic. I've gone to Catholic schools my entire life. I feel like I'm pretty familiar with the different aspects of the religion. I think that there's, so many wonderful things about it. And, it's also true that in a Catholic country, there will be certain ideas that are going to be questioned in ways that maybe simply a country that's Christian or a country that where another religion is really popular, that might not come up in the same way.
Sorry, is that like a private Catholic school that they're all together in?
Yes.
And did you go to boarding school, or was it like more just like a normal Catholic school?
I went to boarding college. So at university, I stayed for a few years in this kind of residential space for students who are all going to uni in the area. But the vibes were very, very boarding school. We had like a lot of rituals, a lot of things that I would never be allowed to share publicly. Some things that date back quite a long way.
Wow.
We had, these graduation gowns that we had to wear at formal dinners and formal events. Some things in the book were very much based on that experience. It wasn't boarding high school necessarily, but it was the year after high school for me that I went and joined this, and it was such a fantastic experience. But the experience of it that was so special to me was that we had left our parents for the first time. Pretty much everyone, we'd been living in our little family systems, and then we left that behind, and then we joined this new system where our fellow students were our family. And I think that's very much what people in boarding school experience. And it's this very different kind of level of intimacy and this sort of, you're not necessarily completely free. You've still got a lot of rules and regulations to follow, but there is this kind of sense of wow, it's just us. We've got a few adults keeping an eye on things and making sure we don't accidentally die, but other than that, we can kind of make our own choices, whereas when we were living in a family, it was a very different dynamic, and I think that's just so fun to write about.
Totally.
There's a lot of independence, and you can kind of, it's a lot you are just kind of, I think it helps you grow a lot, is because you're on your own for the first time. And even though you do have all of those adults figures still around you, you're still having to figure it out for yourself for the first time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you have like permission to reinvent yourself or to be the person that you feel like you have always been. And so even for a situation like the story that you're telling here, maybe in previous circumstances you might not have been comfortable exploring all parts of your sexuality, but then when you're in a place like where you don't have the expectations or the previous um uh expectations or preconceived like notions about who you are that your family takes with you, when that's completely been removed, then you can actually show up however you want to in your sexuality and in all of these other places, and it's like the perfect environment for like exploration, which is really cool and also really challenging, especially in high school. I wonder like how different we all would be if in high school we got to have that kind of experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Probably very different.
Yeah, right? I think I would have been like way I think I would have been cooler. I think I would have
I
really
definitely wouldn't have been, but good for you.
I think I would have been I would have leaned into more of like dressing the way that I wanted to. I mean, I'm sure like I would still be like an absolute nerd, but like in my perception at that time, I could have like leaned into the things that I really would have liked without being concerned about like one of my siblings being like, "You look weird," whatever.
yeah,
You know. So I don't know. Maybe it would be an interesting experience.
Yeah.
definitely. Definitely. Either way, it's probably safe to say that you wouldn't be the exact same person. You would have been in this totally different environment with different rules and
Yeah. 100%.
My mom should have sent me to boarding school.
I know.
what was she thinking?
I would love to know. I would love to know how different we all would be. But Sophie, so when you were creating this story and the decision was made to put the girls in a boarding school, what informed that decision for you?
I wrote the story when I was still living at boarding college.
Oh, you were living when you Oh.
Yeah. So I was 20, 2021.
Oh my goodness.
So yeah, it was I suppose a big case of write what you know. Like I loved talking about it to my friends who didn't live there because it was just this like, you know, I don't want to use the word cult because it's so like
Oh no, it's already.
a lot
I
of
already
negative.
went there in my head.
When you said rituals, I said, now
Yeah,
hold on.
that was it. I was like, "Ooh, cult vibes."
Yeah,
I
what
love
ritual?
it.
It was like we were in the middle of a normal city.
Mhm.
We were going to the same university as normal kids, but like when we went back to that college, it was not normal. we had
Oh,
our
interesting.
yeah. So like, I found it interesting at the time, and I was like, you know, I think this would be like such a fun setting
Yeah.
for this book. Like, what could be more interesting than just this like weird little? I don't think that the boarding school in the book is quite as unhinged as the real life experience could be, but they are teenagers and we were new adults, so
Right.
you know there were some slightly different things going down. But
And you said when you first wrote it, you actually kept getting rejections from editors because they said there was no market for like a royal storyline at all. And it's like, and I think that you have proven that you were ahead of the curve because this was before Red, White, and Royal Blue and Young Royals and all of that. So it's like maybe they should have listened to you up front. Although I feel like there's like it's a double-edged sword because on one hand, if you're the first, there's a lot of pressure on you to kind of like break out and like make it like become the Red, White, and Royal Blue if Red, White, and Royal Blue doesn't exist already. And so now you can at least use that as a comp. So you have people who have read those books or watched the Young Royals and be like, oh, I liked that. I will like this as well.
totally.
So I feel like it kind of goes both ways. I think you're in a good position right now because you have the audience where people will be like, oh, well, I liked her last books and I like those other ones too. So
Absolutely.
how do you feel about it now?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely like really frustrating at the time. I mean, it's always going to be frustrating on submission when you're trying to sell a book that you really believe in and no one else seems to believe in it. But I think the thing that was really striking me and my agent at the time was that editors kept wanting to buy it. So we knew that it wasn't a bad book, which I stand by. But it was that, every time they kept going to acquisitions, it was getting shot down by the powers that be. But it was a very different time. I bring this up fairly often, but it's because I really believe it and I was there watching it in real time. It's kind of like publishing was separated into like before Simon versus the Homo sapiens agenda and after. And this was before. Like I was on submission the year before that book came out. And publishers quite literally just didn't think that they thought of queer books as this tiny little niche, that would sell like a handful of copies. And that's what was happening at acquisitions. They were coming back and they were saying, well, that's a very, very, like, why would we want to buy that? That's so niche. You're asking for people who like queer books, but also people who like royalty. And whereas I think post Simon, it was given that queer books could sell if they were a good book. So suddenly it became, is your book good? Is your book on trend? Like it felt a little bit more like we were being treated like the book could sell on its merits. Whereas a couple of years earlier, it was like, well, the book's not going to sell, so therefore why would we buy it? It was just this like ceiling that you just couldn't seem to break through.
And there was a disconnect too between agents and the editors on that, because the agents were actively seeking voices, like queer voices and underrepresented voices, but publishing had not yet caught up to be like, oh, you know what, there is a market for this. They just didn't believe it. And that was even with All That's Left in the World. It was my first draft of it was written, I think, the year before Simon Versus came out. And when that came out and I read it and I saw how well it did, I was like, oh, wait, there might actually be a market for a queer post-apocalyptic book. And I think, thank Becky Abbott-Halley, because like, I think because of that book, there's a lot of, again, talking about being ahead of the curve, there's a lot of queer authors that probably wouldn't have careers if it wasn't for that book being as big as it was. So it's like, thank Becky for it, and thank Margot Wood at Epic Reads, who was basically the champion of it, and who is also a YA author. It's exciting now that we
a lot of people came together.
Plenty of people that are actually out there reading and enjoying these books.
Yeah, and it's important for people to. I mean, we know this. It's like I'm like, this is sort of in the echo chamber now, but it's so important and comforting to see these stories being told, especially in the YA genre, because there's I think also specifically for lesbian stories to be told in a YA lens. I feel like, and I'm speaking kind of as in my experience of just a woman in general, women in relationships with other women are so easily sexualized that having a story be told that is told in a YA lens, like obviously there's some level of like sexual that happens because it's not a friendship, it's a romantic relationship, but having these stories be told in a way where like there is more than like, oh, two girls making out, that's so hot, and then like them not even being believed as being romantic partners, like that type of stuff happens so much that it's nice to experience YA stories that are lesbian stories. Like it just, I don't know, it hits different. It's just special. Like it's a special thing to bring to the YA community, and it's a really like beautiful way to share representation with people who are queer and wanting to see that and experience it.
Yeah, it's kind of like, you've got this multifaceted experience, and if you only ever see like one small section of that experience represented, it's like, okay, but what about the rest of my life? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So I love that. I think that's really don't know, it warms my heart and it's just so lovely. I also, as I was learning about you, Sophie, you have one of my favorite about me's I've ever read on the website before.
Really?
Yes, because you tell this story about being, and it's like very short, but it's a quick little story about how your mom was transcribing the stories you were telling her from the bathtub. And then at some point there were artistic differences. Would you like to share what the artistic differences were?
Oh yeah, I would like to know.
Yeah. So in the story, all of the characters needed to die at the end. And Mum found that really concerning because I was like 5 years old. So she was just constantly trying to be like, can't they just like go out for a milkshake, like resolve their differences? And I was just like, no, that's not what happens in the story. You're not listening to me. And I mean, I'm not the only author who knows how this feels. When the story comes to you, that's just that is the ending. It's not up to you. You can't just make them go out for a milkshake. That's lying. So,
lying.
Yeah, kill them all off. Oh. So does your mom ever like say, "Oh, well, I didn't like"? Has your mom read your books and said that she didn't like the ending anymore?
No, that's she doesn't criticize the endings anymore. But to be fair, I do write rom-coms now.
Yeah.
So
no
I'm trying
really
to like go
dies at the end.
down a bit of a darker path. So go back to my roots.
Yeah, we love that.
Yeah. So she might be a little bit less impressed by them, but sometimes people got to die.
So like, not to give a spoiler, but nobody dies in Nobody in Particular at the end.
Not on page.
Oh. That's a great answer, Sophie. Unhinged.
You find a way to kill
answer.
him off
Yeah.
somehow. I like that.
Just don't get comfortable as
Yeah, exactly. Ready and willing to kill him off at any time. That's so funny.
Whether you're ordering wings for the game, whipping up a 7-layer dip, or ordering pizza, there's something about football that makes you want to eat. And this football season, Uber Eats has the best deals on game day food. No matter what you're craving, from 2-for-1 pizza to buy one, get one wings, Uber Eats will be dropping new deals each week, all season long. Uber Eats, official on-demand delivery partner of the NFL. Order now. Terms and conditions apply. See app for details.
Clorox Sentiva smells like lavender. Cleans like Clorox. And feels like...
All right, that could go on for a while. Experience the long-lasting freshness of Clorox Sentiva. Now available in Clorox Sentiva Lavender Scented Bleach. Use as directed.
Pepcid Complete knows that food is one of the best parts of game day. That is, until heartburn strikes. Thankfully, just one chewable tablet of Pepcid Complete provides dual-action heartburn relief with an antacid that starts working instantly and an acid reducer that lasts all day. So you can stay focused on that second helping of chili without worrying about heartburn. All day based on 8-hour symptom relief studies during the day. Use product only as directed.
Hey, it's Jonathan London of the Geekscape podcast, and I want to tell you all about the first official Geekscape comic book, Paul London, Hero of the Prophecy. This is equal parts sci-fi fantasy, comedic adventure, and pro wrestling entertainment told in a nostalgic style. If you're a fan of 80s films like Conan the Barbarian, Krull, Willow, the Beastmaster, and comedic mistaken identity movies like The Army of Darkness, Three Amigos, and Galaxy Quest, you're gonna love Paul London, Hero of the Prophecy. That's right, I wrote it about my younger brother Paul London, former WWE Cruiserweight and Tag Team Champion. But in this story, he's now washed up, down on his luck, and then magically transported across the universe to a distant planet of sword and sorcery. Once there, he's mistaken to be the hero of the prophecy, destined to free an entire kingdom from the evil sorcerer Ramzar. This is 26 pages of full-color pro wrestling fantasy comic book adventure. Podcast listeners, this is a comic for you. Go to herooftheprophecy.com to learn more. Paul London, Hero of the Prophecy.
I'm not a writer, so I'm not a writer, I'm just a reader. So I don't like I like the experience of learning how everyone creates stories, and that feeling of like if I'm not telling that's the way the story is, I'd be lying if I didn't tell it that way is very cool. I like that.
Yeah, like I've seen actually a few authors. Jodi Picoult was like a big one as well, talking about how there's kind of they feel like they're transcribing a story sometimes rather than like telling a story. And I've always felt like that. Like I would just be minding my own business, and then a story will just appear in
Yeah.
my head. Like, and for me, I know that this isn't everyone's experience, but it is a common one.
Mhm.
Like, it's just the whole story's there. And there
Yeah.
have been times when I've tried to, in the past, change in big ways, change what I thought the story was meant to be. And then I would just run into this dead end, and I'd be like, okay, it's because I was ignoring what I knew the story was meant to be. Like, it was always
Yeah.
supposed to be this. It's not up to me. I don't have the skills to like edit that.
That's beautiful. I love that. The story just like comes to you, and if you're not going to tell it the way that it's meant to, your brain is like, "No. Actually,
Yeah.
no."
Yeah, like I don't know if I ever actually made up any of these. I feel like I just kind of was given them.
This is like divine intervention. This is what happens when you go to a culty Catholic school. You're
My
very
God,
connected.
no!
This is the rituals, Sophie. You created your
No!
conduit now for these stories.
I think I've talked about it before where Elizabeth Gilbert, she was saying that ideas and stories are living things that go from person to person. And if you get the
Yeah.
idea, it is that story is the way it wants to be told. And if you don't do it, then it'll go on to somebody else.
I was a mentor once. I'm sorry if this is just not on topic at all. I was a mentor once.
That's the vibe here.
Yeah.
So let's keep it going.
And when you're a mentor, like in Pitch Wars, I think it might have been, or something similar, you get given all these different stories with people trying to audition. Is audition the right word? Trying to apply to be mentored by you. So I got a couple hundred stories, and this one particular year, like a huge chunk of the stories had this very specific plot, like where it's been long enough now, where star signs become people, like personified versions of star signs, and then you follow their adventures. And like every author had a different take on it. Like some would be set in space, some would be set like in a high school, but for all of them, it was all the star signs are now people. And I was like, this is so fascinating because I actually don't have the sense that they're all copying each other. It's almost like this idea was just like out there, and then all these different people like received it almost. Like maybe it is a little bit mystical in a way. Like, I don't know.
Very cool.
See, I
It
think
was very interesting.
I love this theory, and I would like to know how I could open up. How could I? What ritual do I need to do to become a conduit for a really great story one day?
I don't know, but I was doing it at 5. So.
Okay.
I feel like it's boredom because that's usually when my ideas come to me. It's when I'm sitting there and daydreaming and just trying
Maybe.
like when I'm folding laundry, shopping, driving somewhere. Driving's a big one. If you go on a long road trip, usually I went to this book festival. It was in Columbus, Ohio, and on a map, Columbus and Ohio and Pennsylvania, they're touching, but everybody kind of forgets how big of a state Pennsylvania is.
Yeah, it's huge.
And so I was going to fly over, and my plane got canceled the day I was supposed to be there, and so I had to drive, and it was I think a 9-hour drive, and so for that whole 9 hours going straight all across the entire state of Pennsylvania on the same road, I just sat there and I came up with this whole like fantasy idea, and I was building the world in my head, and I haven't sat down to write a word of it, but I started building all of that, and I was like figuring out like multiple arcs and storylines and the politics in this world. So just having your mind
Have a
go
nice
kind
long
of
drive.
be bored. And you start kind of telling yourself a story.
Yeah, I guess I'd go on walks.
Sophie was bored in the bathtub.
Probably. And so I decided to kill people.
Take a bath.
How do your stories typically come to you, Sophie?
Well, um,
She has to take a bath. It's the
just take a
magic
bath.
power.
They've always just come at different times, and like I mentioned, most of the time, especially the good ones, just
Mhm.
arrive, like delivered to the doorstep.
Yeah.
Yeah, there have been a couple of times when I haven't had a delivery recently, so I need to like sit down and actually figure out a plot. That has happened a couple of times. I do tend to find that like that's a more difficult book to write. There have been a couple of my releases where I'm like, that was a chore.
Mhm.
And I do kind of feel like, sometimes I'm a little bit less proud of those books, the ones that I had to like force into existence. And then there's a couple of other books that I didn't have to force. And I'm like, yeah, everyone should read those. I'm really. And nobody in particular is definitely one that just came to me out of nowhere. I was at work. I worked in a supermarket at the time, uni student, and probably the boredom thing. I was walking around self-serve,
Mhm.
helping people who pressed the wrong button and couldn't weigh their items for hours, and suddenly there was a whole book in my head to play with.
That's amazing. I wish my brain worked that way. It definitely doesn't.
So listen, there's the question that you always want to ask. It sounds like it's answered, but
Yeah, well, so I always ask, when you're writing a book, because I always compare it to the way that Eric writes his books in like a very chaotic way,
Mhm.
where like he just like starts drafting and sees
Mhm.
what happens. Are you a person who like outlines and then you write? Or I don't know.
Yeah, so when I get the idea, the first thing I do is sit down and write it
Mhm.
out in order. So I
Mhm.
don't have names yet. Usually it's just like girl, boy. Um, so that's usually about 5,000 words by the time I finish it. And then I'll go through and separate that into chapters roughly. I'll figure out how long I want the book to be, and I'll assign each chapter a word length, and then I go from there. I do like to write out of order when I can. So
that's crazy, Sophie.
I think even assigning like page numbers to each chapter is so interesting.
yeah, like I can, and it's usually like very accurate. Like I can look at the final draft and it'll be pretty much more or less in line with what I had on day one.
Sophie, this is amazing. How?
So wait, do you write the scenes you most want to write first, or do you write the scenes that you don't want to write first?
No, I write whatever I'm in the mood for that day. Like some days will be a kissing scene day,
Mhm.
and then other days will be a kill everyone day, or whatever the hell that day happens to be. Like that's the day when I'm going to write that chapter the best. And that it's
Mm,
always been the case. And like I do tend to find out that some days I'm actually really in the mood to just write like a low stakes filler scene. Like there's never, leftover scenes where it's like, well, I never wanted to do this. I always end up wanting to do them at some point. Whereas when it's a little bit trickier when you get into like full-time author life and you're selling books on proposal. Like I don't have the luxury of just writing whatever I want because I need to have the first 30,000 words done by X date. So I can't be messing around writing the ending.
yeah.
I need to be doing this. I do find that like produces a book that I enjoy a little bit less. Like my
Mm.
initial way always works best for me.
Yeah. I'm just worried that every day for me is a kissing and killing day. Like it's like, what do I
Well,
want? I just the whole book is kissing and killing. Actually, that sounds pretty good.
That sounds
I
great.
I'd read
mean,
that.
isn't that basically the pitch for your book? Like,
Yeah, actually.
it's not like you wrote a quiet slice of life there, Eric.
Exactly, Sophie. Exactly. That's so funny. That's amazing. I feel like you do more of an outline, I think, than what Eric does, which is chaos.
Mm.
And
I have the beginning and the end figured out. It's just the middle.
it's the
That's
whole
what I
Well,
have to
you
middle.
need
find out.
those.
But I the way that you write is so interesting. How do you well, I guess because you do a sort of rough outline in the beginning, because my first question was going to be, how are you keeping track of how you're developing all of these stories as you go, but I don't know, do they feel like they just like live in your bones so much that there's no real keeping track, it just is?
Yeah, I don't tend to like forget things very often. Little details, yes, I do need to write them down. Like let's
Mhm.
say I figure out like the wording for a riddle. Like I'm
Yeah.
not gonna remember that. Like that needs to go down. But yeah, like it kind of just like lives. It's a little bit like maybe a chessboard or something. Like I don't know if you've seen The Queen's Gambit.
Mhm.
There's this scene where she's lying in bed and she can visualize the chessboard on the ceiling and the pieces are all moving around. That's what it feels like to me to
Yes.
think about a book. Like the characters all just move like they're on stage, and I can see that one going over here and this one going over here. And I know that if this one does this, this one will do this, which will then mean like I can just see it all happening. So I genuinely do think it's related to ADHD. Like, I have a diagnosis of ADHD, and so do so many authors. Like,
Yeah.
so
I do too.
many
Yeah.
authors. So I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm suspicious. I think
Yeah.
there's probably some sort of link there where the brain's like really, really good at just taking off and running and taking in all this information and laying it all out. And I'm like, yeah, that fits.
Do you find yourself like don't if you get distracted by like life and you stop working on it, can you easily pick up the book later? Like say in like a month your life slows down a little bit, can you pick
Mm.
up the book later and like almost go right back in, or does it take you a little bit to kind of get the feeling back?
Nobody in particular I didn't work on for a decade.
Oh,
So
well, yeah.
yeah, I do. I really do feel like Only Mostly Devastated. A few years after that, I wrote a prequel for a pre-order campaign, and I sat down and started writing, and it did not take me long to like feel like I had Ollie's voice again. Like I could feel them all again, and it didn't feel anything like writing another book. It feels like writing Only Mostly Devastated. Like, do you know what I mean by that? Like, they have their feelings.
Mhm.
Books.
Mhm.
I think so. Was
Yeah.
there anything that so like between your first draft of Nobody in Particular and the time it finally came out, you've written what, one, two, three, four, five other books that were published at least.
Mm.
Was there anything that you learned while writing and editing them that helped you when you went back to revisit Nobody in Particular?
Oh, 1,000%. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, I kind of do feel like, even though I do stand by it was a good book and good enough to be published the first time round, I'm kind of glad that it's getting published now because, like, I've made it better. I've made it quite a bit better,
Yeah.
I think. It's, 10 years of practice. I think one of the biggest things that really annoyed me when I went back to the initial draft of Nobody in Particular was that I wasn't utilizing scenes well at all. Like, I was... Now I think when I'm writing a scene, I'm trying to accomplish multiple things at once. No one ever just talks about things just to talk about them,
Right.
Ideally it's to show character and to drop in some relevant information and to pace the story correctly, like all these things. Whereas I used to just really focus on one thing back 10 years ago. Like, I would want to show these characters talking, so therefore they would have a conversation, but the conversation would be about nothing. And it's like, okay, cool. This isn't bad.
Yeah.
But like, you could be using this conversation to get other stuff done right
Mm.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's probably the biggest change, like just multitasking in a scene more.
I feel like that's a big like I don't want to say amateur, but like amateur mistake where it's like if it's your first thing
Yeah.
that you're writing,
Yeah.
it's you kind of that was always anytime I gave somebody feedback on writing, I'm like, there's a lot of like there's a difference between banter and like a conversation that is just there because it's a realistic conversation. It's like that shouldn't be in fiction because yes, we have these conversations where you talk about what you're eating and talk about your day and all of that stuff, but it's not essential to a plot, it's wasted time. So it's like you
Yeah.
have to find a way to make those like little moments where it actually makes sense for the plot as well.
Yeah, that's spot on. Like, and like you said, amateur writers, which I can remember being, is like, well, it's realistic. I this is what humans do. I've reflected humans wonderfully. It's, you have. But, I'm bored enough when I'm having that conversation in real life. I don't really want to read about fictional people having that conversation.
I gave this class on realistic dialogue, and the way I prefaced it was nobody actually wants realistic dialogue. We want dialogue that feels realistic, where even if we aren't, even if we're like sitting there watching these two, like if you're watching Gilmore Girls, like nobody talks like that.
No.
That's crazy. But we buy it because of these characters and who they are. And we're like, okay, this makes sense. This feels realistic to who they are. And it's a TV show. We want it to be like quick, zippy dialogue that's funny and like keeps us interested.
Yeah.
And you can't do that when it's just a boring, flat conversation where they're not actually talking about anything. It's like every single thing. They were saying multiple things with every single conversation they were having. There's like layers to it.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's fun.
When you went back and changed the way that those conversations were happening, did it make the finished product shorter?
I added like 20 or 30,000 words. I got in so much trouble.
Well, I'm trying to cut stuff now, so that actually this is helpful because I'm actually working on my fourth book and I'm trying to cut words from it. And I'm going to go through and look at the conversations that I have and see when the important stuff starts to go away, and I'm going to see if I can cut things like that way.
It is a good way of like cutting stuff down. I think my problem was that I added in this grief subplot. And I was really fascinated. I love writing about grief and emotions like that. I think that they're also really good to have in young adult books because as a psychologist who's worked in high schools, that would often be something I noticed that would be a first for a lot of teenagers where they would come in and they've just had their first family member die. They've lost a grandparent, they've lost, in horrible cases, sometimes friends. And they just don't even have the beginning of a toolbox to work through it because, we don't talk about grief often as a society. It's a little bit still taboo. We don't represent it much in children's media, or if we do, it tends to be not very heavy, which I get because, kids are kids, but like when they're dealing with it the first time, they can be really taken aback by how hard it's hitting them, and they're coming in saying like, am I okay? Like, I don't feel okay. And it's like, grief does not feel good for a long time, and that is completely normal. There's nothing wrong with you. Unfortunately, this is just how it's going to be for a little while. Anyway, so I like portraying grief as realistically as I can in my YAs because I think that that's a really good thing to get exposed to before you have an experience like that yourself. Anyway, you can't add in a grief subplot with 1,000 words, it turns out.
Right.
You've got to do it. You need to like,
turns out.
you can't just like do a little brief mention. Oh yeah, by the way, we're grieving. Like that has to be woven into every single scene. Otherwise, rightly, people would be like, "What the hell was that in there for?"
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So it turns out that it added a lot of words.
That's fair. But yeah, like I never thought about that, how grief is portrayed for young people in like a kind of light way, so that when they actually are experiencing it, they're like, is there something wrong with me? And you're like, no, not at all. I never thought about that.
Yeah.
That's really
like even in, kids' TV shows, they might have like a plot line when grandma dies, and they're kind of like, they'll maybe cry, but then like they'll have this really lovely moment where they like do something symbolic and yay, grandma's in heaven now, and then it's never brought up again.
Yeah. That's so
and they would always usually do it like if they were killing off like a major character, they would always do it in like one of the last episodes. It'll be like maybe 2 or 3 episodes before the last for the season. And then they have those 2 or 3 episodes to get through some heavy emotions. And then all of a sudden there's the whole summer break and they come back and they have worked through all of this grief. And there's like little things here and there that may come up, but they just kind of, there's none of the real actual work involved of like dealing with their emotions.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's just unfortunately not what it's like in real life. In real life, it's just this like, oh, thing
Yeah.
that's always there for a long time.
Yeah, yeah. And you said you were a psychologist in high school?
Yeah, so I am a psychologist.
Okay.
For many years there, I worked in a high school. So yeah,
Wow.
it's one of those things where like they work really well as parallel jobs because I can see in real time like how kids are processing the things that are happening to them in real life, what things tend to be quite difficult for them to work through, what their concerns are. So I want to, point out that never in a million years would I ever take someone's story or someone's information and use that for a book. That's not what I'm talking about at all. But it is just, I suppose, getting like an on the ground awareness of what teenagers are experiencing, what's important to them, and just knowing, hey, that would actually be a really good thing to tackle in this book because I bet that there are other teenagers dealing with similar questions, similar experiences.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like you are a person who is so uniquely prepared and gifted for this job. Like between that experience, like working with people who are high schoolers and hearing the things that like they're actually concerned about and like the challenges they're actually having, and also from a perspective of being a psychologist, so wanting to be there to help and like empathize and share it in what that story is while supporting them. And these stories are just coming to you like magic into your brain. And so, like, I don't know if if there's ever been a person who is meant to be doing this job more than you, and that's so beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Funnily enough, Becky Abitalia actually has a very similar little backstory there. She's a good friend of mine, and she
Mhm.
was a psychologist who worked with queer teens as well when she
Wow.
wrote Simon. So
See? I think that's I mean, that's a great because it also it like you have actual experience in what these like young adults actually want to hear and things that make sense to them. Like you can
yeah,
always tell when you especially I feel like you see this especially with movies and TV shows where you're like, why is a story about Gen Z being written by what is so clearly a boomer?
yeah.
And and they're like it's like a group of like teenagers and they're like, well, I just want to spend all of my day on my iPhone. And you're like, what are we talking? What's going on? You
Oh,
know?
that's so funny.
And it's like so out of touch and like you're able to bring this like very grounded experience, I'm sure, to these stories that could feel very like, distance from someone who has no real experience
Mm.
with them, which is really nice.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, definitely every year that goes past, like I'm older and I'm like a little bit longer ago that I was a teenager, and not only that, but like being a teenager becomes more and more different, with
Yeah.
every generation. So, when I wrote this book, I just left high school basically. So like
Yeah.
that was very different to like 12 years later where you're like, ah.
I only just realized like yesterday I was like sitting there watching TV and I went, I graduated from high school 20 years ago. And I could not believe it. I was like, wow, I can't believe it's literally. I
Wow.
was like, wait, when did I graduate? It's like 2005. I was like, it's 2025.
It's just
So
the
yeah, I
time
think it sneaks up on you.
the time flies, the time flies. Like, I graduated high school in 2011, and even
Yeah.
between then and now, so much is different. Like, when I graduated high school, we had Instagram, but
Mm.
it was, like, using the, like, Valencia filter, and everything was,
Mhm.
like, very
Filters a bit.
cu yeah, everything was, like, weird and grungy, but also kind of filtered, and everything was just so different, and I think
Mm.
that, like, I don't know, it even the way that we especially, like, when we're talking about, like, romance and rom-coms and all, like, those stories, the way that we relate to each other in romantic settings is was so different in high school than it
Yeah.
is now. Like, I can't imagine being a senior in high school and being able to like have access to Tinder and like all these, like what an insane experience. And even like I think every year more and more kids are more comfortable going to school far away from home, and like it's
Mm.
just every year the world just feels bigger and bigger and more um I don't know, there's just so much happening all the time that people are being exposed to, and it's just so different. I don't even know how I got there, but it's just so
Yeah,
different.
if you're a high school student listening to this, your life is a lot harder than ours was when we all graduated. So
I've never
sorry.
even thought of Tinder in high school.
Right?
That would not even occur to me.
Right? Like that's so crazy. And I also think I think in some ways their experience is harder and in other ways it's a lot easier. Like every now and again I have like a moment of shock when I realize that our parents had to like write every single one of their college papers going to a physical library and flipping through physical books to write them, and that sounds terrible.
I did that a couple times even. Like I graduated in 2010.
Mhm.
You know, yeah, like we were very much in that transition period.
Yeah.
And to be fair, we had MySpace top friends.
Yes.
Which is the
That's
most
true.
traumatizing thing that's ever been invented.
Oh,
I stand by that.
yes, your top 8?
And you'd have to order them, kids listening. You had to put them in order, and it was just accepted that the order was ranked by who you liked more and who you were closer with, because people would change it. You would have like an awkward conversation with a friend and you'd be down a slot. And that was like normal. And then you had to put crushes in there. Like when you started like talking to someone that you liked,
they would get slowly moved up the rank. God. And then like I feel like there was always that one person who was like, "No, the order doesn't matter. It just is." And I'm like, "Bullshit. The order does matter. The order mattered."
Cuz you're
See, I
moving
did
it.
it differently. I knew that would happen. So what I did is I just changed it every single day and I just updated it frequently so that
Wow.
it was different friends and I was always kind of moving the same people around.
You little
And
people
then if I
pleaser.
didn't, I would forget and be like, "Oh, okay."
But even
Because I
like knowing
knew.
who to put in there.
Yeah.
Like, or, you know, if you've got like an odd number of friends, what if you've got like 9 really good friends? You have to choose whether to have the top 8 or the top 12. And then you've got the top 12. Who feels so slow? Oh my, it was politics on the next level.
It really was. Producer Matt said his strategy was to make all of his top 8 random celebrities. That's a great idea.
These were smart ideas that we should have implemented, but we just didn't.
Yeah,
well, me and my friends didn't.
No, I definitely didn't. I leaned into the top 8 and I don't even know what I did. I'm sure now looking back on it, it was probably really embarrassing. Like I'm sure I definitely had people in my top 8 that I just really wanted to be friends with and I just like had them in there to be like, I don't know.
Oh my god, the worst. It's like that's like acknowledgements as an author. Like, who do you acknowledge? What if you acknowledge someone as a friend and they're like, "Why am I in your acknowledgements?"
Has somebody ever said that? I would be like, what? If somebody said that to me, I'd be like, "Why'd you read my book?"
Literally, that's what I would say. That's what I would say too. Be like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Did you not feel comfortable with your name being mentioned in the tens of thousands of words that I wrote and created and then had to edit and then had to put on what's it called when they have stuff? Like, please." Oh my god. I would be like, "Well,
You won't be in the next one. Don't worry.
Yeah, you won't have to be in the next one." That's
Mine is always
crazy.
just worried about forgetting people because every time I write my acknowledgments, I always forget. And I keep a list the entire time I'm drafting the book. I have a Word document that I add people's names to it every time I think about it. And I will still forget people.
It's hard.
Like I've forgotten friends that like I have asked for help with from books. And like I've talked to them about it a lot. And all of a sudden they're not in the acknowledgments. I'm like,
Producer Matt says that when Eric's book comes out, when his books come out, he looks to see if he was acknowledged to determine how much he'll prioritize reading it. Hilarious. And psycho.
There's an extra pressure.
I don't think I put you guys in The Only Light Left Burning.
It's fine.
I guess I'll have to add you to the Matt says, no, you didn't.
That's why I hasn't read it
Well, to be fair, when the podcast did not exist when I had turned in the final draft for that. So the podcast started last February 2024, and The Only Light Left Burning came out in May of 2024. So that book was in the bag and out the door by that point.
Sure.
And probably printed and sitting in a warehouse.
That's what they all say.
But watch, I'll probably forget it on the next one.
Oh my
I'm
god.
gonna slyly open up the acknowledgments for Bet of the Devil right now and just be like,
Yeah, exactly. So Nobody in Particular is actually not out yet. Is it 6 days from now?
It's in June.
no, it's
Oh,
in June.
Goodreads is doing a giveaway for a copy of the book that ends in 6 days. So I saw 6 days, and that's what I remembered for a second. Okay, I'm sorry. So this is June 3rd.
Yes, yep. But you can enter to get a
Yeah.
depending on when this podcast goes up.
Yeah,
But if you don't tell at least one friend about Nobody in Particular when you listen to this podcast, Sophie will call you, and if you don't tell a friend within 6 days, you will die.
Yes. That is
Yeah,
the
it sounds
rules.
like me.
Just like the ring.
That sounds like me.
Your bathtub will fill with bubbles, and all of a sudden she'll come out and be like, "You're dead now. My mom isn't here to stop me."
Oh my gosh. Well, that's really exciting. And I think that this is going to be such a special story to tell after it's also been so long that you've been wanting to share it. And well, it's really special. You must be really excited to finally be able to like give this to the world.
I'm so excited. It's like every time I get a review, I'm just like, oh my gosh, tagged in a review, like just knowing that people are finally reading it and seeing the reception that's been, good so far. So, which is like, it's always like a lot of pressure when, the books go out. It's like, oh my God, is there going to be like a thing that I didn't realize that I did wrong that everyone's going to hate? But no, nothing like that so far.
I feel like
Thank
that's
goodness.
every book too, because even like Stephen King said he gets nervous when a book is about to come out, and it's like,
Really?
you're Stephen King. Like, how are you nervous? He says he's still always nervous that people aren't going to like a book. So it's like,
Yeah.
like you have like 70 books out. There's plenty I didn't like.
Don't tell him.
Still keep coming back though. I mean,
It's just so special to all of us.
Sophie, do you know that on Goodreads, there's 15,000 people who marked this book as wanting to, like it's in their TBR? 15,000 people.
Yay. That's tracking well for this time.
That's amazing. I always think about Madison Square Garden holds 20,000 people. So you are like just shy of a Madison Square Garden's worth of people who have decided that they are going to read your book. And that is so exciting.
Well, that's an interesting way of putting it.
I think about that all the time. Because it's hard to understand, especially in the world of social media with like followers and views and things like that. You can't really conceptualize what that means.
Yeah.
Like, what is 15,000? But when you're in Madison Square Garden and that place feels full, that's a lot of people, and that's really special. And they finally get to share this story with you that's been like a part of you for a decade. It's amazing.
Yeah. Oh, how lovely is that? So basically what you're telling me is that like if I were to do a book launch in Madison Square Garden, it would just be like
it would be sold out.
Yeah.
And you can hold me to that. And you can hold me to that. I feel
that
firm on
sounds,
that.
I think that tracks.
Alyssa, book it.
Yeah.
Especially in June. What do they have going on in June?
Slow time. Slow time for concerts is the summer.
Yeah.
I've heard that before.
Good. Great. So I'll just shotgun one of those nights. And
it'll be perfect.
Before we let you go, Sophie, can you tell us if you're reading anything good lately? Doesn't have to be YA either. So.
I don't know, because like usually I would really want to like talk about the ways that I've just been reading. But at the moment, I'm currently reading a book called Journey of Souls, which is about reincarnation.
Oh, girl. I love this because you are literally, I love this. After you read that book, you're going to have more stories that come to you in conduit like that. It's going to be, this is great. I love this.
Yes. Yeah. It's about this this person who like he reckons he put all these different people under hypnosis, like thousands of people, to like recall their past lives, and they all had like the exact same story of what it's like to die and what it's like to come back. So I'm only at the beginning, but I'm so curious to see what this is all about.
Now I want to be hypnotized and find out about my past lives.
Me too. Like I am convinced that I died in the Black Plague. When I was young, I used to have this like nightmare about this bird, right? And it was so vivid. The bird just terrified me because when you saw the bird, it meant that you were going to die.
Oh shit.
And like when I was really little too, like 4 or 5 years old, I would be like sobbing because I had another dream that the bird came and that it was time to die. Really, really intense. And like my parents were like, the bird doesn't exist. I'm like, the bird does exist. And then when I was like older in primary school, I like picked up a book about like natural disasters and stuff. And then in a story about the Black Death, there was a picture of the bird. I was like, oh my God. It was like the doctors with the long like black mum.
That's exactly what I was thinking of. Yeah.
Doctor.
That was the bird. I was like, oh my God, the bird does exist. So now I'm like, yeah, that probably happened to me. That tracks.
Oh my God. I have chills. That's so creepy. And also, you as a child, what was going on? Like,
that's why everybody's dying at the end. She's like, why? Everybody dies.
I've died. You've died. We've all died.
Your mom was literally like, can't they just get a milkshake? Sophie, please.
Not when my soul's lived through the Black Death, okay?
Right.
Yeah. They didn't have milkshakes in the Black Death.
They just had death.
You at 5, a realist. You're like, no. Actually, no.
No, I'm sorry. That can't do it.
Oh my God, that's amazing. That is so funny. Well, it sounds like a great book and feels like it's very up your alley.
Yeah.
I know, I'm not pitching it very well. I'm making it sound like it's this horrible, like everyone dies. Like, no, it's actually, it's a drama, but it's a romantic drama.
Oh, okay. But we can recommend nobody in particular because this has been a labor of love and it's finally going to be here very, very soon. And it's so exciting and it looks so beautiful.
Yay. I do love the cover. It's the most beautiful cover.
It is a great cover.
The outfits
Did they
are
keep
very
the
cute.
same cover in the UK and Australia?
Similar.
Okay.
It's beautiful.
Did that one come out yet?
Talk too much about that just yet.
Oh, okay. Well, then
But
I'll keep an eye out for
my
that
socials.
one. Yeah.
We'll keep our eyes.
Well, thank you for coming on. It was so great to finally meet you face to face and to talk about nobody in particular. And we'll obviously have to have you back on for your next book, but I also we need to get into your back catalog too. So start talking about all those books.
We can start making like a weekly appointment.
Yeah.
Love.
Perfect.
Love that plan. Thank you, Sophie.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.
Night.
When she asks me how far we can take it, I tell her we can take it across the entire universe. You are my universe, not just a place.
See, I told you that her accent was lovely. And I wish you all could have seen her hair. I really do, because it was lovely.
I actually, my Siri is the Australian male accent.
I love that.
I just like it when he gives me directions and tells me to go into the car park.
And the car park.
That's what he calls parking lots. It's so fun.
I love that. That might
But I will say, ever since they updated him to version 18, he sounds a little depressed.
Really?
I'm worried. Yeah.
Oh,
I don't think he likes being intelligent. So they added the Apple Intelligence.
I find that as every day goes, I want to learn less and less. I don't want to know anymore. If I'm honest, I've learned enough. I don't want to know.
So then what are you reading?
So I've been in a reading slump. I've been really stretching myself thin since the end of last year. So I've been trying to read and having a really hard time. I don't know why this was the book that I started to read. This was like a really silly idea, but the Fourth Wing book, it's Iron something. Why did I pick a book that's like
Iron Flame?
Iron Flame, 600-700 pages? I'm looking at it over there. I'm like, I haven't touched you.
It's a doorstop.
It's a doorstop.
Literally stopping a door from closing.
Yeah, really it is. So I've been working through that. I also have the audiobook too. That helps. Whenever I'm in a reading slump, an audiobook really helps to like get me through at least one story, and then I'm like, I'm hooked back again. And I'm also done traveling for like literally the foreseeable future. I don't have another trip planned, so I'm really looking forward to like being a homebody again and digging into my books and my never-ending TBR. But
Well, hopefully, nobody in particular can get you out of your reading slump.
I know, I was thinking that. I was like, this actually feels like it really would. So,
Mhm.
maybe I'll start that later
I think
tonight.
so. And then if you definitely like that, I would check out Perfect on Paper is what it's called.
Perfect on Paper.
By Sophie. It's it's about a girl who runs like a actually you would love Perfect on Paper.
Really?
I don't think it's like relationship. She runs it relationship advice out of her locker.
Shut up.
She basically people don't realize it's her locker because it's nobody has been assigned to it. She found out it was not assigned.
Mhm.
And so people come and drop off like asking for love advice, and she will respond to them after they drop it off in the thing. I was like, as I was thinking about it, I was like, wait, this is definitely an Alyssa book. So, I mean, I know you already have Nobody in Particular,
Yeah.
but maybe go out and get Perfect on Paper. as
Yeah.
well, because
That's
that's I think very much up your
crazy.
alley.
Wow. Okay, I
I
put it
love
on.
Perfect on Paper. It was really good. I like all of Sophie's books, but Perfect on Paper, I was like, that was that one, and only Mostly Devastated. I like speed read just because it's a really short book.
Yeah.
But Perfect on Paper is a like longer book that I still read pretty quickly for
Okay.
me, who's a slow reader.
Yeah. Okay, amazing. I just put it on my TBR. Oh man. Okay. Love it. What are you reading?
I am reading a thriller because I have read a lot of romances lately, and I'm
Mhm.
like, you know what? I need to see some people getting killed instead of drinking milkshakes.
Right.
So I'm reading a book called Faithless. It is by Karen Slaughter. She is my go-to thriller book because she's got a whole bunch of
Really?
them. And it's about it's like a I think fifth in a series, and it's about the town sheriff and the medical examiner are ex-husband and wife, but they're moving back in together, and they have a fight, and they're going out for a walk, and they end up finding this body of a girl who has been buried alive and then poisoned while she was buried.
Oh shit.
And they are trying to figure out who did it and like why. And it's got a weird, creepy, culty church with rituals.
Ooh.
And there's also like some other unsavory elements working around that might be involved. So it's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Her books are always such fast reads for me.
Okay. I love that. Usually thrillers are what get me back into reading again. So, thrillers are always a good shout too, but we'll get back on track. I miss reading. I'm like so behind. My reading goal is 45 books this year, which is a lot for me, and I'm really
It's a lot for
behind.
me.
That's a lot. So I really want, and I have so many amazing books that I bought even like kind of recently, and I'm like looking at them and they're looking at me, and we're having a staring contest right now.
Got to put them in the closet.
Oh,
Hide them.
so they
Hide them
can't
away.
They can't make eye contact with me anymore.
Exactly.
Well, thank you everybody for listening to another episode of YAOK. Follow us on Instagram at YAOK Podcast and let us know what you're reading. Anything else? Eric J. Brown?
I think that's it.
All right. Well,
guess we'll just talk to everybody next time.
We'll let you go then.
right.
All right. You have a good one. Take the Entenmann's when you go.
Thanks, Mom.
Ever met a foundation that does it all? Say hi to NARS Light Reflecting Foundation. Makeup meets skincare in a bottle. It evens skin tone, blurs imperfections, and has a natural radiant finish. Plus, it's formulated with skincare ingredients to help strengthen your skin's barrier. With a newly expanded shade range of over 40 radiant shades to choose from and buildable all-day wear, NARS Light Reflecting Foundation. Find your perfect match.
You're listening to the Geekscape Network.